Cool. This delay seems like it's much better.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot my water. You're so lucky.
it's, this is a fixable problem. If you want to go get water,
I'm here now. It's fine. I've had water before. I know what it tastes like.
it's, I'm reminded of the Breaking Bad episode with Jesse and his girlfriend who's addicted to heroin. They're going through a Georgia O'Keeffe museum,
Mm-hmm.
and Jesse asks, or his girlfriend asks, or no, Jesse asks his girlfriend, who's the Georgia O'Keeffe fan, why would you want to go through this museum again if you've already seen it? Because she mentioned that she had seen the same exhibit go through. And she responds, why would you ever want to have sex again if you've already had sex? And they're sort of like in the throes of the honeymoon period of their relationship. And he's like, oh, fair point. But I like to think about that. My dad especially takes this opinion. He's on the autism spectrum.
I'm wary of where this is going right now.
We're talking about my parents having sex. He is on the autism spectrum and I think has difficulty understanding and processing things that happen on the emotional layer. And he takes a viewpoint of music that he doesn't understand music. And why would anyone ever listen to the same song again? And it's taken me such a long time to come to a place where I feel like I'm starting to understand it. There are songs that I emotionally connect to, that when I listen to them, I have this very visceral experience. And I think it was much easier for me to do this when I was younger. But there's still some songs like Defying Gravity from Wicked really consistently evokes a very specific feeling in me. It's like tingles going up my spine, and it's like this feeling of inspiration. And I don't think my dad experiences that, which is tragic. Of what a important layer of the human experience to be able to experience art in a way that you can emotionally connect with.
Yeah. And would you say that's universal across music and other arts for him?
I don't know that I can think of any type of art that he enjoys. He has read novels, but he reads novels in a way of checking them off a list to be able to say that he's read them and to know the story points and to know the main characters. I don't think he's getting like a. I don't think he's emotionally connecting with the work. Right. Yeah. Especially not to emotionally connect with it. Yeah. No, I can't think of a type of art that I think he enjoys emotionally.
The fascinating thing about the music eliciting emotions is that we don't know why. I find that at least as fascinating as the fact that it elicits emotions. Is that we actually have very little understanding as to why on earth a certain piece of music would make us feel a certain way at all. There are a few theories bandied about, but really nothing particularly conclusive, which I think is awesome.
That is awesome. And also surprising I would think that would be reasonably straightforward
But then you try and explain it and you're like, where do you even start?
Like, I think it doesn't like babies crying. There's a hardwired visceral experience to that. So you can sort of point to, here's this example of where the neurons in your ears are connected to the emotional centers.
And that one you can see a very clear evolutionary reason for it.
Right.
Then, next step. Continue.
Okay, then I could make a claim about that deeper voices are more calming and soothing because that's what we're exposed to as children, and that's the and slower voices also because that's evoking feelings of safety, and we associate those feelings with those sounds. And then I don't know, you could probably make a jump to instruments that sound like voices, like violins sort of sound sort of like crying, and bass instruments sort of sound like a low voice. So by mixing those, we're sort of just playing with those emotional circuits. We have these hardwired, here's the button for a baby crying, but if you have a violin, it sort of sweeps over that button and makes a more complicated feeling because it's hitting several things at once. I think that's how I'd make the argument.
But it's very specifically certain frequencies and certain tunes that elicit responses in people. It's not nearly as like it's not any time you hear a violin note. It's a specific sequence of specific frequencies that particularly resonates with people. And I don't know that you can that easily map that to, a baby crying or.
That's a fun idea. Okay, so maybe the internal
what, to release a
circuitry.
pop song of babies crying?
the idea that we're getting this very complicated emotional response from a stimulus that we can't really explain why it's getting the emotional response, and that has something to do with the internal circuitry. It's like a black box of, okay, we know this box responds to babies crying and soothing low voices, and just by experimenting with, let's throw every type of sound at this box. Oh, that's weird. We get this weird response when we play violin music in this specific sequence.
Mm-hmm.
That may be indicative of the circuits for how that box is functionally responding to babies crying in deep voices. Has a edge case bug in it that wasn't expected. That also responds to
So I
violin.
kind of the closest that I can guess at is if, for example, different notes are simply different frequencies, right?
Yeah.
And if, for example, that happens to be the frequency or set of frequencies that your brain uses to communicate from one part of itself to another, there are electrical signals in the brain. In the same way that if you can make a sound at the exact right pitch, you can smash glass, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's just that happens to be the frequency, that happens to be the radio channel that one part of your brain uses to talk to another part, and so you send that in, and suddenly, it starts hijacking things. But
And there's
again,
just crosstalk. There's interference in the frequencies. That's a fun idea.
yeah, but even then, like, is your brain communicating from one side to another in essentially beautiful music? Like, is that what we're getting at? If you take the answer is no, as far as I know, because I have seen somewhere that research has been done, where you play. I think this was in this may have been in the Why We Sleep book, actually, where they took traces of brain activity and then played it as audio, and it did have that effect of helping people to sleep. For example, it helped make those parts of the brain do what they were supposed to in people who naturally it wouldn't.
Yes.
But it didn't sound like beautiful music. So
I'm reminded from Why We Sleep. I think that particular section was about alpha waves, that your brain does go through these rhythms, and especially when you're sleeping, there's this process of your neurons all sort of sync together. It's chaotic most of the time, but when you're sleeping, there's alpha waves that start from the back and go forward at a rate of something like once every 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds or something. And since I read it, I don't know if this is placebo, but when I start falling asleep, I have a sensation that feels exactly like that. That I'm positive I could just be imagining, but I like to think that it's possible that I could be feeling the alpha waves going through my brain. And yeah, I think you can induce those by just playing a rhythmic, like at the same frequency as that's going. So this is a fun thing to think about. We stumbled on music as a way to play with these circuits and hijack the signals that are going on in the brain, probably because music is straightforward to discover. Of, okay, we have this rock, we're going to hit it. Oh, it makes a sound. Great, we've invented a drum. We were tying this thing together, and we plucked it when it was tight. We've invented all string instruments. I blew through this thing.
How it went, yeah.
It's
like you were there.
So sassy. I love the British humor. So I think the obvious question here now is, starting from scratch, starting with, we have full control over making any arbitrary sound. We've discovered that sound is just vibrating a membrane with an electrical impulse. What would other experiments in this look like? What if your goal was, let's figure out how to reverse engineer ways to evoke specific emotions in people, starting from a blank slate? How might you approach that process?
I think you might just be describing the music industry.
Yeah, because it's a lot of
not
synthesized
entirely,
sounds.
because I think that industry has figured out that they can make money from doing things other than eliciting the strongest possible emotion. But that is effectively what they're doing, right? They will make more money the more that the sounds that they produce resonate with the people listening to them, and they will optimize for that.
Wow. Yeah. Huh. And even the mechanism I'm describing of what if you could just come up with any arbitrary sound? They do that. There are synthesized instruments. That's effectively doing what I'm describing. Huh. Neat.
Well, that's interesting. The pure synthesized instruments don't. I think it's harder to create a highly resonating emotional piece of music using a synth. We actually seem to respond better to violins and pianos and things. So it seems that our brains aren't interested in the pure frequencies as much as they need noise. They don't want pure. They want something that has a bit of analog depth to it.
That seems like something that could be replicated. And I can think of there's two synthesized songs that I feel like I resonate with. Maybe it's just familiarity. Maybe it's that there is more music with violin and piano, and so and you get exposed to that at an earlier age, so that's more familiar.
Maybe, although that raises something else interesting, which is, although I guess that's not unique to music. I guess any of your senses are able to transport you back to times when you experienced a similar thing through that sense in the past. Music can do it, but equally smells can do it.
Smells arguably more. What would a music industry for smells look like? I guess that's sort of the perfume industry, but
don't tell me you don't have smell-o-vision in the States. Smell-o-vision, in fact, I say that half jokingly, but actually, oh no, it was American. This was attempted. Yes, smell-o-vision in 19. The use of scent in conjunction with film dates back to 1906. Isn't that fascinating? Before the introduction of sound to films.
Wow.
The Wikipedia actually says before the introduction of sound. I filled in the in movies because I assume that's
the
what
world
they meant.
Was silent before 1906.
Yeah, like if you went back 100 years and just had to experience the whole world in grayscale, it'd be yeah.
That's funny.
So yeah, smell-o-vision was attempted and never really caught on.
My understanding is that it's a very difficult technical problem because unlike sound, where the output and input is this very simple machine of you have a membrane and you have some sort of an electrical signal that can move it. And with displays of if you have red, green, and blue, you can make almost any color that you can see with your eyes. Smell, I think, is vastly complicated. There is no RGB equivalent for smells. I think the best product that I've seen recently is just something that ships with a catalog of whatever 100 different smells of it's a little drop of lemon oil and it's a little drop of vanilla, and then we can make like a lemon pound cake by mixing together vanilla and lemon. But that's so complicated, and now it's 1,000 times worse than ink cartridges because you have to keep refilling all these different smells. And nothing that I've tried has been very immersive. There's a Disney ride, I think, that incorporates smell, and it smells sort of cheap. It's like the scratch and sniff level
Yeah, but
quality
isn't
of
that
smell.
interesting? Like it's, I mean, and you see the same with taste when they try and create when you get like an artificial grape flavor, which is an entirely different food taste than grape. You know, I'd never thought about this so much. That actually, what we've been able to do with audio and video is the reason that we can't do that. That we haven't really done that with taste. That there's less demand for it, and so it's not been, researched as much, or is it that it is a far more complex system, and therefore we haven't figured out how to digitize it and then recreate it?
I feel like it's the latter. I also love thinking about, in this same space, how technology would have developed if a different species had developed it. Sight and sound are incredibly important for how humans interact with the world. But what if dogs had invented technology? I feel like they would have prioritized smell much higher than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, they certainly wouldn't have done anything with RGB because I don't believe they see in color.
Yeah, their screens would be in black and white. And if it was I think cuttlefish have like 2 extra photoreceptors that can see 2 different colors, so they would have made their displays much more vivid.
So with cuttlefish, I don't think they would have been able to engineer the soldering, the circuit boards. They would have found that difficult. No opposable thumbs.
It would have been harder.
Down. Yeah.
Also, getting the irons to heat hot enough with water taking the heat away all around them. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be tough.
It would be harder.
Yeah. I think maybe cognitively as well, it's probably kind of beyond them.
On some days, especially recovering from the surgery, I feel about as smart as a cuttlefish. I feel like it's a rare day where I'm pulling my weight as a human.
Yeah. When was your surgery?
5 days ago.
Okay. And
it was great. It went exactly according to plan. I'm really happy with the prep work I put into it. I'm really happy with the research I did, and becoming confident that was the right thing to do. This is something that I've been waffling on for like the last 2 years. And it's been difficult to sort of piece apart the feelings of anxiety and trepidation at just, this is a thing I've never done before and it's scary and there's risk involved, with this is an actual intellectual, reasonable argument for why I should or shouldn't do this. And I almost needed to sort of step outside myself and think, okay, here are the steps that I've gone through. Here are the checks that I've done. If I was advising someone else to do this, would I say that they were making a reasonable choice? Mm-hmm. Because getting in my own head, it's so easy for me to intellectualize any decision. In the state that I was in was sort of just getting your wisdom teeth out is stupid because it's an unnecessary risk and you don't need to have your teeth out. And this is a product of Western medicine, of something that people do just sort of for fun to solve a problem in a very easy way instead of going through the hard work of proper dental hygiene and filling in teeth that are way back in your mouth. And I could make that argument all day. I could dig my heels in and be like, no, anyone who gets their wisdom teeth out is stupid. And like, here are the reasons why. Here's my very well-formed, reasoned, rational argument. And that opinion for me was completely based in, I think retrospectively, feeling anxious about having the surgery done. I did not want to do it, and I was trying to justify that rationally. And this is one of the clearest examples in my life where I feel like I was able to piece that apart of, okay, well, no, the 3 dentists I've talked to when I went in all recommended I get these taken out. I have 2 uncles who are dentists. I asked them what they would do in my position. They both said take all of them out. and that the problem would only get worse. I went to 2 different specialists of people who specialize in wisdom teeth. They both said take them all out. I did a bunch of online research, which I found information in both directions, but trying to look at it objectively, the more credible evidence was coming from people who seemed to know more of what they're talking about. It was like dentists and people who actually deal with teeth. And yes, of course, you can find arguments in people who are arguing not to do it, but those are coming from, as much as I can look at this objectively, coming from objectively less credible sources. And going through the process of like picking that apart and figuring out, what do I actually believe? Which side of this do I actually want to be on, as opposed to just falling victim to my emotions and then trying to justify it with logic. It's sort of horrifying. I'm reconsidering now how many other choices in my life am I doing just because I happen to feel a certain way because of whatever quirk of how I was raised in the environment that I'm in, that I've dug in my intellectualized position on that doesn't actually make any sense. So I'm very glad I went through this experience and have this feeling of what it feels like to convince myself out of a position that I got into emotionally.
Yeah, but it raises a great question of what are you supposed to use to make your decisions, if not emotions and logic?
Yeah. That's a tough question. it's something I'm still struggling with, especially trying to work through recovering from codependency of feeling comfortable being more autonomous, feeling comfortable knowing what I want. That's a very difficult problem, to know what you want. And if you want to have a successful relationship, you not only need to know what you want, you need to be able to advocate for it and do it in a sensitive way where you're also taking into account what the other person wants. But knowing what you want is what a vastly complicated problem. You sort of need to simulate at least 2 different realities of, in reality A, I make this choice, and in reality B, I make the opposite choice. Okay, let's step that forward. Okay, well, how far do you step it forward? Are we talking about like what's good for you in the short term? Which one you will immediately feel better after? Are we talking about 20 years from now? Which one of those 2 realities is better? There's a musical called If Then with Idina Menzel as the lead in the original Broadway performance that walks through these 2 realities for a single choice that she makes in her life. And it's a beautiful production. It's so well staged. They're swapping back and forth between these 2 realities, and there's these lighting cues so you know which reality you're in. And as the production goes on, the best reality swaps back and forth of who you would rather be. In one of them, someone dies, and she's like, "Oh, this is so sad that he died," and you're like, "Oh, clearly the other reality was better." But then in the reality where he died, like I'm having trouble recalling the plot, but it's something like, she starts a nonprofit based on that, and then ends up in a much better place. So like
that's fascinating.
That's the process you need to go through to know what you want. So I don't know.
Well,
I think
the answer on the one hand, yes, that's the process you have to go through. On the other hand, it highlights that that's completely futile. You can't play it forward in that way. You would have absolutely no idea. It just shows how impossible it is to know which one is going to be better. And I think the biggest question of all, when you talk about which one of those, even if you could, I mean, as you've seen there, even if she could, even if when making the decision, she could see 5 years, 10 years, 20 years out, who's defining which is better? Because it arguably depends on what then happens after that again.
Right.
Like it's not nearly as simple as person dies, therefore that one is worse, like you say. Which you might think it is if you kind of traditionally you might say, yep, better is when people don't die. It's a fairly, justified argument, but it's also flawed.
I agree that it's a futile exercise to try to solve that problem, but I don't know. I don't know by what other method you're supposed to do it. Like, feelings are sort of this nice heuristic of do what you think feels right, or people give the advice like be true to yourself and do what you know is right deep in your heart. And like, okay, that doesn't fucking help. But
That's also two very different things. Your emotional and rational systems are incredibly conditioned based on what you happen to have experienced in the past.
Yeah.
And so, are you actually being true to yourself even if you do really listen to your emotions? Like you said, they can be flawed. They can be, and you then use the logic to back up whatever the emotions were saying. But if you experienced something differently last week, you may have a totally different emotion now about that experience. And so, I guess whether it's doable or not is a different question. But being true to yourself actually, I think, means, and doing what you intuitively feel is right, actually means getting beneath those conditioned emotions and thoughts, and sort of trying to feel, not based on your emotional and logical reaction to trying to play it forward, but actually trying to feel, what does the universe want me to do? That's not a very easy activity. And the other thing is, does it? It raises a couple of other interesting questions. One being, do you actually have a choice at all? And the other,
Not according to you. We're finite state machines.
that reminded me, by the way, when we were talking about using programming metaphors. One day I'll tell you my theories about my essay entitled "God, Spirituality, and Hashing Algorithms."
That sounds like you wrote that article for me.
It's not written yet, but it has some ideas flying around. I'll talk to you about it sometime. Anyway, so do you have the choice at all? And is any of the decisions really wrong, in the sense that you just continue living your life down whichever path you've chosen? Is there the other whether whether you had a choice at the time that you made the choice or not? You certainly don't have the choice once it's been made. You are now down that path until we're able to, travel time.
I need that. Make this much easier.
And so at that point, are we not being incredibly reductive to start talking about whether this path that we are on is better or worse than another possible path that we could have been on, in the sense that this one is real and the other one is entirely illusory? It's a fiction because it's not the path you're on.
I think that makes sense when looking backwards, so that you don't lament the past and learn to accept the present. But I think that's the only tool available to be able to hone your ability to make decisions for the future. If you can't use the past as an example of, I had this experience. I had a choice between A and B. I chose B, and I think choice A would have been better because I've lived through B, and B is not very good, and A probably would have brought me here. That's the tool now, so that the next time I'm at a junction of A and B, I can choose A instead. I don't know how else you could hone that process of making better decisions.
Right. There's a big there's a very big difference between I should have chosen A last time is very different than I have decided to choose A next time.
Yes.
That's what I've got.
Yeah, because now it's focused on what you can actually control. That's a healthy mentality. Based on what you said about the necessity to not get caught up in just the heuristics of your past experiences and look underneath the emotion and be able to better evaluate that. I'm thinking about, if I was trying to design people, if I was trying to design a machine that could successfully navigate an incredibly complicated world, that's a really good shortcut of you have been making decisions pretty well so far, as evidenced by you still exist. So we can probably trust as a default choice that whatever decisions you've made that have got you to this point will probably continue allowing you to exist in the future. So if you have an experience that's traumatic, if you have an experience that threatens your existence, save that, and every single time in the future, make the decision so that you're avoiding whatever the traumatic event was. Which makes so much sense at a population level, and I think the difficulty you get to is on an individual level. If someone has PTSD, yes, and also it's not a good. Well, what am I trying to say? It's not a sophisticated algorithm. It's sort of just like remember the things that you've done before and continue acting in a way that you have acted, because the way that you have acted is successful.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially
that's
what machine learning attempts to do, right? Here's a training set of some decent decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Now go and operate doing what you think is right, and when you find out whether something was right or wrong, add that to the database. And you get smarter over time. It's always going to be an approximation. It can't. That's always going to fall short. It's always going to be oversimplified in some way. But that is essentially how people program robots today.
I love pulling machine learning into this because, that's something that people have academically studied that has a very clear outcome. This doesn't have the problems of trying to think about this in human decisions of, how do you decide what the right thing to do was? Okay, well, in machine learning, we've decided. It's, can you recognize that this is a cat and not a dog?
I'll tell you what the difference is, though. In machine learning, it is you make an objective decision about what is better and what is worse. As in, if you're trying to build a robot to win at chess, you have a very clear goal that you set. You are trying to win the game of chess based on the defined rules of the game of chess. And so anytime a decision is made, the machine can then see that resulted in a win or that resulted in a loss or a stalemate, and that goes back into the database. I'm not sure that's quite as straightforward in real life, because as you explained from the Idina Menzel musical, what is the win or loss criteria? How do you define whether that you can play it forward a while? What are you trying to optimize your life for? I guess is a harder question to answer than what are you trying to optimize your chess tournament for? You're trying to optimize it for as many wins at chess. What are you trying to optimize your life for is a little bit trickier.
What a fucking question. Yeah, what are the rules for life? What are the win conditions? Because I sort of want to jump to like
interesting realization that that how many people ask that question, let alone answer it. Questions are always more interesting than answers, I find. But yeah, how many people even ask that question?
I think you sort of default to money and status and power and dopamine, maybe
Well,
accumulation of things and experiences.
yeah, and, well, I guess that makes me think of the kind of the different philosophical stances. There's kind of the hedonistic ideas where you optimize for dopamine pretty much, nothing else. Versus various other.
I think I've implicitly had the idea that a very obvious rule of the game of life would be try to play it as long as possible. I think there's a book called Finite and Discrete Games about this topic. Or
That's an
finite
interesting
and
one.
non-finite games.
Optimizing for length of life.
Yeah, but even then, I can think of if there were any other thing you were trying to optimize for, I can devise a million scenarios where you would not want to be optimizing for length. If the goal was, I don't know, make as many paper clips as possible, it may very well be that you find yourself in a situation where sacrificing yourself would maximize the number of paper clips, and so you make that choice.
Yeah, and if you were truly optimizing for length of life, you would presumably just go and research everything you can about nations and individuals who lived longer, and you would try and replicate exactly what they did, regardless of, for example, your own enjoyment. So there's got to be a few things at play.
Sure. Also, I like the problem of balancing longevity with enjoyment. Of what if the way to live the longest is just to be technically cellularly alive and just get hooked up to an IV and a
And that's the
coma.
other thing. You'd certainly never go and cross any streets, for example.
Right. Yeah.
Statistically, that has a non-zero chance of drastically shortening your life.
Yep.
And therefore, it would not be in your best interest.
Yep. What a question. How? What are the things that you'd like to be optimizing for? What are your win conditions?
Yeah. One thing that I definitely know is that I certainly used to think that it was material things more than I think it is now. Like you say, I think a lot of people naturally default to, money or various things in that realm. I certainly think it's those less than the more I ask the question, the less I think it's material things. Partly because they're just kind of. It's interesting to look at why do we think those things are important in the first place. And I think the more that you ask that question, the less you're able to find a satisfying answer. So then you get into the kind of then you start exploring the more spiritual ideas of optimizing for embracing every moment regardless. That's an interesting one to explore.
What's the rule of Stoicism? Is it tranquility? What do they say?
I think Stoicism is a lot around like virtue. It's about doing right. For a definition of right. I don't. Stoicism is an interesting one because I don't know a lot about it, and it seems like it's very similar but also very different at the same time to things like to spiritual things, to things like Buddhism. It has there's an awful lot in common between Stoicism and Buddhism, but there's also a lot that separates them. which is always quite interesting. I don't know tons about it. The Stoics had 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, morality, courage, and moderation. The highest good. To the Stoics, the answer is virtue. Everything we face in life was an opportunity to respond with virtue. Virtue is the only good for human beings. Yeah, so for whatever virtue means, that seems to be what they're on. Moral excellence.
There's the next problem.
Virtue is moral excellence. So being morally excellent. There you go. That's what the Stoics would say, would optimize for, would say is their win condition.
Well, that seems better than dopamine. That seems better than things.
Things is just very the problem with things is that, like, the problem with any of them, but particularly with things, is that 100 years from now you're not going to have them anymore. So they're very short-lived. Maybe they're marginally long. They're marginally longer lived than optimizing for dopamine, hedonism. But actually, in in the timeline of the world, it's very much a rounding error. They both round to 0 for how long you're, whether you optimize for short-term wins right now or you optimize for, expensive shit that you're gonna enjoy for a very small number of years, relatively speaking, even if you're optimizing for long life.
Yeah, the hedonic treadmill just grinds away. It's about. I think that pleasure and satisfaction. You asked a great question about why we think things are important in the first place. I think it's a trick of relating this back to a conversation we had a week or two ago. It's a trick of thinking that changing your external environment will better your internal world. It's a trick of thinking that if you're moving somewhere else, I'm going to go on this vacation in Orlando and my life's going to be so great. But if you're thinking about it in terms of I'm moving the world around me, I'm still going to be me. I'm still here. It's sort of in this fixed position at 0, 0, 0. And I'm just moving the world around me. No, of course not. Of course that won't help anything. You're the same person. It seems obvious that the only potentially meaningful games would have to be happening internally. That it would have to be something that you have control of. It would have to be something that's modifying your internal state. And so I love the idea of virtue, of pursuing moral excellence. I'd love to dig more into what it would look like to be morally excellent. What things am I doing in life now that are not morally excellent? That seems like a much better goal than, hitting a higher number in MRR or hitting a higher YouTuber subscriber count, because those things are all fleeting. And when I get there, I will be the same person in the same mental state. If the reason why I want to get there is that I'm hungry for more, okay, well, when I get there, that internal state will not have changed. I will still be hungry for more. It doesn't matter what my external circumstance is if I'm just continually hungry. But if I can address internally the feeling of hunger, okay, well, now I've actually gotten somewhere. Now I've actually moved, as opposed to just moving the world around me.
Yeah, so I discussed this a little bit. This came up on Twitter yesterday with Louis Nichols. We were talking about this notion that new founders seems to be often this kind of accepted notion that it's very hard, you'll probably fail, and whether that mindset is actually hindering people moving forward in their business, starting businesses. And would it be, what would happen if instead there was an expectation that you'll succeed? And my response was that probably works better, but that they both share the same flaw, which is, I'll send you my reply. You might find it interesting. You might not agree with it. But one thing that did stand out to me was that actually whether you're playing the game aiming for, expecting that it's going to go badly or whatever, or whether you're playing the game expecting that it's going to go well, neither of those expectations is helpful compared to playing the game for the sake of playing the game.
I like that thought. I just realized I have horribly mismanaged my time. I have another call.
It's the hour. All right.
I have one more thought on that note, though, which is in ordering this new Apple Silicon MacBook, I found myself worked into a tizzy of just, I mentioned this earlier, just neurotically refreshing the shipment page. And there was the situation where I'm going on a trip to Thanksgiving in St. Louis. And so I thought with the original ship date that I would ship it to St. Louis, but then it shipped early, which was actually a bad thing for me because if I had changed the address to me, then I would have gotten it faster. So I was thinking, oh, do I get a plane ticket out there? Or do I try to contact Apple and get the shipment date changed? So I called Apple and tried to get the shipment date changed, or the shipment address changed, and they changed it. But then I realized I'm going to get it even later now because it's not going to deliver before I leave. So I'm going to leave and then it's going to get here and then I'm going to have to wait until I get back. And I just took them, and this was in the throes of like, I'm in pain and I'm taking drugs that I don't usually take, and so my baseline tranquility was disturbed. And like, I got to that point because of something that I predict to be very positive in my life. And I was letting it just like completely negatively impact the quality of my day. And I hate that. Yes, it doesn't matter if your expectation is good or bad. It doesn't matter if the projection that you're having on the world is optimistic or pessimistic. Both expectations will lead you to being discontent with how the world is. That's a powerful idea. I need to schedule more time for us next week. Do you want to do the next week at the same time?
Yes.
Great. I will see you then.